Tonight, battle over actions. After a march to the polls ends with pepper spray, late word from the Alamance County Sheriff's Office on their version of the events. We'll have live reaction from the march organizer.
Plus, Election Eve. As the campaign trail comes to an end, America's fate is in the voters' hands. We'll break down the state of the race and a look ahead to post-election tensions.
There's a lot of news we're following tonight.
And it's all on ELN Local News.
Live from the Jane and Brian Williams studio at Elon University School of Communications, you're watching ELN Local News.
We begin tonight with breaking news following the latest developments on the march to the polls that took place in Graham. Good evening. I'm Maeve Ashbrook.
And I'm Margaret Faust. Reverend Gregory DRUMWRIGHT is planning another I Am Change march to the polls tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. in Graham, after the march Saturday was forced out of the streets with pepper spray by the Graham Police Department and the Alamance County Sheriff's Department. DRUMWRIGHT says he was discouraged by the amount of police presence at the march.
We asked for there not to be such excessive police presence and military force, given the fact that we had already convened a peaceful demonstration just months before.
According to the Graham Police Department, 8 people were arrested, many charged with failure to disperse. In a press conference yesterday, Graham Police Lieutenant Daniel Sisk says DRUMWRIGHT and the marchers were told to leave the street before pepper spraying began.
A mild irritant, and we chose to use that rather than physical force to get people moved out of the roadway. I understand that some people were saying that we pepper spray children and disabled folks. Again, I'm going to reiterate, we never directly sprayed anyone in the face. It was all directed towards the ground in an effort to disperse the crowd.
We spoke with 2 ELN students arrested, Hannah Garcia and Tim Olson, who both say they will be at the march tomorrow.
I'm going. I don't plan to be arrested. I don't think anyone plans to be arrested. But if they do the same things, I'm going to do my best to stay by the people who have stood by me.
Personally, I'm Christian, and the one parable that I think represents what this whole movement is about turning the other cheek. If they hit you on one side, you want to show them your other, because that's the image and that's the effect that we're going to try to promote and enact change.
And over the weekend, Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris visited North Carolina. When a reporter had to brief her on what happened in Graham, she said everyone should be able to vote freely.
I think it's very important that everyone be able to vote and without any hindrance, without any intimidation, without any obstacles. Again, there's too much at stake, and we want to preserve everyone's right to be able to be heard through their vote this election.
Also today, the Sheriff's Office is explaining why they acted the way they did at the historic courthouse Saturday. They're claiming that organizers brought a gas-powered generator that wasn't allowed. According to the Sheriff's Office, it was after attempts from officers to unplug the generator when the event got out of hand.
We are extremely disappointed that Reverend DRUMWRIGHT did not adhere to the guidelines clearly stated in the facility use policy by bringing flammable materials to the event.
The Sheriff's Office says 16 people total were arrested by their department Saturday.
And joining us now is our Isabella Seaman with Reverend Gregory DRUMWRIGHT. Bella?
Thank you, Maeve and Margaret. I'm joined live now with the march organizer to the March to the Polls, Reverend Gregory DRUMWRIGHT. Reverend, thank you so much for sitting down with us tonight, and let's get started. So first of all, you're still planning on having another March to the Polls tomorrow?
Yes, we are going to convene the We Are Ready for Change Push to the Polls March.
Okay, and does the Sheriff's Office or Graham Police know about this?
We will notify them. These details are yet to be released to the public, the final details, but the Sheriff's Office and the Graham Police Department will be notified.
So your permit was through the Sheriff's Office last time, correct?
That is correct.
Is there another permit for tomorrow?
There is no permit for tomorrow's march because the window for permitting those matters has already transpired, and so we do not plan to occupy the streets on tomorrow. We will march on sidewalks as much as they're available to us.
Absolutely. So With the sheriff's conference today, they said that the reason that things started getting out of hand was there was a gas-powered generator. Did you know that this was against the permit, and why was it there?
Well, we want to uplift that what we sought to do in Graham on the 31st of October was not unlike what we did in Graham on July the 11th under full permits and cooperation with the local authorities. We asked ahead of the march and continue to ask what was different about our plan on the 31st. And we have not received any answers. We know that there were late-breaking policies that were enacted, and we know that didn't exist on July the 11th. And we know that those policies, which we have not received documentation of, were to quell our efforts. In terms of the specific details regarding what the sheriff's office uplifted, my attorneys have asked me not to comment at this time because it is an active criminal investigation. However, it is not shocking to us that the Alamance County Sheriff's Office did not take questions from the press. They literally brought press together from all over the state to give a PowerPoint presentation and to stop short of giving the community a full accountability by receiving questions from the free press. We believe that that is demonstrative of their efforts to spin the narrative and slander our organization.
In your opinion, was there any reason for either the Graham Police Department, the Sheriff's Office to use this pepper fog that they were using?
Not any reason in Graham, Alamance County, and it should not be any reason all over this country. What we have realized and what we have lived through is a sharp reversal of what we consider to be the civil rights movement progress. We've received calls from all over the world, and people are commenting that this looks like a scene out of the 1960s. There is no reason for peaceful protesters to be violated, to be infringed upon, for our First Amendment rights to be infringed upon, for there to be excessive force in the midst of a rally that was proceeding peacefully.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And so the Graham Police Department said in their press conference that they sprayed the pepper fog on the ground and that they were given, that the members were given verbal warning before they started to use this. What was your reaction to this? Did you hear the warning? Did you know of this warning?
There's a public outcry against those false narratives simply because the world was watching. Global news networks have already begun to call the Graham Police Department and the Sheriff's Department out because there's tons of media videos and pictures that show that they did not exclusively direct their pepper spray to the ground, that they actually sprayed it directly at people. And I'm one of those people. If your viewers would go to our social media, they could actually see that there are pictures of me using my hand to prevent pepper spray from hitting my face.
Mm-hmm. And was it clear to the marchers where they were allowed to be and where they weren't allowed to be before the march, during the march, after?
Yes, the marchers were clear. We intended to occupy the street for the George Floyd Memorial for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And the Graham Police Department uplifted that fact. They just continued to say that, but at the 9-minute mark, we began to use excessive force and some kind of chemical reagent to push them onto the sidewalks. Now, I know that ELN University students can do simple arithmetic. That is 14 seconds difference. 14 seconds for hundreds of people, including ELN students who were present, to get on the sidewalks before the police began to spray them down with a chemical reagent and use excessive force. That is egregious.
Now, for the last question, moving on to tomorrow, what do you hope to get out of the March to the Polls tomorrow? Do you hope that it's more successful? Do you think that it's going to end up the same way or differently?
Well, we wouldn't plan any event thinking that it was going to end up the same way. We don't want confrontation with the police. As a matter of fact, we sent a letter to the local authorities ahead of this last weekend's events, asking them not to bring militia force, asking them not to arm up, asking them not to overpopulate the area where our peaceful marchers were going to convene the rally. However, as we all know now, that didn't happen. So on tomorrow, yes, we want to peacefully push the people to where we didn't land, to the polls. We are hearing from people who did not vote on Saturday because of the police interaction and because they ended our rally in a scene of chaos. Also, people who were thrown, wrestled to the ground, people who sustained injuries from the events that happened on last Saturday are still interested in voting. What is very unfortunate, though, is last Saturday was the last day for Alamance County residents to register. We're hearing from people that cannot vote now because they can no longer register.
Absolutely. We're going to hear more about the election later on. Reverend DRUMWRIGHT, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Maeve and Margaret, back to you.
For coverage of the march this weekend, visit our website, elonnewsnetwork.com. And coming up, we'll fill you in on precinct locations and the state of the race as we head into Election Day. All eyes are on North Carolina this week as the state is critical for both President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden's path to 270 electoral votes. With Election Day just one day away, I took a look at the state of that race and others here in North Carolina. With just over 3.6 million early votes cast and over 900,000 mail-in ballots received, the race to win North Carolina is on. Early voting numbers alone turned out 49% of registered voters in the state. Recent polling has the Real Clear Politics average, with former Vice President Joe Biden just 0.3% ahead of President Donald Trump. President of Elon College Republicans Alexis Malaguti and President of Elon College Republicans Daniel DeRosiak say the race is just too close to call.
I've tried to hold back on making concrete predictions just to spare myself some maybe disappointment.
I obviously want my candidate to win. I think all of us who have individual political ideologies want their candidate to win, but I'm just excited to see what happens as a result of this.
This isn't the first year North Carolina is a battleground state. Since 2008, the state has gone both blue and red, with candidates narrowly winning North Carolina's 15 electoral votes. Another important race to watch in North Carolina is the U.S. Senate race between incumbent Republican Tom Tillis and Democrat candidate Cal Cunningham. Real Clear Politics average has Cunningham nearly 4 points ahead of Tillis in the latest polling. No matter who wins, DeRosiak says he's excited to see where his party goes in the future.
We're the next generation of Republican leadership, so we get to dictate how our party reacts to the Trump presidency, whether he loses in 2020 or if he gets a second term.
But for Malaguti, she says she's hesitant to trust her party after the election, even if Biden wins.
I think it will embolden the DNC to say, hey, look, we won this election without the progressive left or the radical left. Moving forward, we can continue to run moderate candidates and win that way.
The North Carolina State Board of Elections says it anticipates being able to report 97% of all ballots cast in the state on election night. These would include any votes cast via early voting, mail-in ballots received by 5 p.m. tonight, and all votes cast on Election Day.
According to data from Tufts University, nearly 65% of North Carolina youth voters ages 18 to 29 already voted in the 2020 election. Brian Ray tells us how youth voter turnout can influence the election in a swing state.
This is how we speak up for ourselves. It's how we advocate for ourselves. It's how we hold our elected officials accountable, and it's a privilege.
Kate Padell is on a mission to get her fellow college students to vote. She's part of ELN Votes, a nonpartisan group to help students navigate the voting process.
It's hard as a college student to get out of the college bubble and see, especially in local elections, what the effect of voting has. So I think a lot of people just don't care.
To put this into perspective, if this was the population of Elon University students, according to the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement, in 2016, this many were eligible to vote, and this many actually voted. But this election cycle, Podell says things are already looking different.
Seeing a huge uptick in voter registrations, for sure. Changing registration to North Carolina, that was our most asked question this year.
Maryland native Tommy Truitt is one of those students.
Maryland tends to go pretty solidly blue every year, so I knew that North Carolina was a more important state to cast my vote in, like my vote would count more here.
Director of the ELN poll, Jason Husser, says it was the youth vote that pushed President Obama to win North Carolina in 2008. But young voters also have a large say locally.
If ELN students decided that they wanted to back a particular candidate for town aldermans, for instance, in the town of ELN, they could pretty much pick who won.
Husser says youth voters tend to vote in waves when elections seem competitive and high stakes.
Students realize that either person could win, their vote matters, this election is very much up for grabs by either candidate, and the stakes are very high.
Truitt says it's important young people vote to get their voices heard.
I think it is also a very just important way to show that as the American people, like who we want representing our country and things like that.
Brian Ray, Elon Local News.
Podell says nearly 32% of ELN students registered for the first time here in North Carolina using ELN Votes. She says they expect to have full data of student voter turnout in March 2021.
Earlier today, we spoke with Assistant Professor of Political Science, Carrie Eves, on how the university is planning for post-election tensions that may be inevitably found on or near our campus. Take a look. States all across the United States are passing record highs as far as people who have early voted or even sent in mail-in ballots at this point. What do you think this says about the state of our democracy?
Well, people are paying attention and engaged. I think that while it's tough to read too much into the early vote, we do know that people are very engaged in the process. We're seeing people make smart voting decisions with the pandemic. And so it's hard to say if this means we'll have higher turnout overall, but it does mean that people are planning, and we'll see what the turnout numbers look like in the end. But I'm encouraged by everyone thinking about and getting civically engaged.
Concerned at all with the events of the past weekend in Graham specifically, that could shape a lot of what post-election tension is going to look like in the next week or few weeks?
I think we've been concerned for a while. We know that the community is highly polarized. We know the nation is really polarized. We certainly don't want to see voter suppression efforts on Election Day. We want everyone who is legally able to get to the ballot box, cast a vote, and that is of the utmost importance, and then time for those votes to be counted. I think it's probably, wise to think about sort of how people will feel and react, and we just don't know. So we're planning for all eventualities and making sure that students are informed and have good information and can stay safe.
So how is the university planning for post-election tensions that may be inevitably found either on campus or close by?
Yeah, so we've done a variety of things. There's a list of resources on the ELN Votes website. There's a tab that's been added recently that has events happening across campus. We've planned these in advance of the election results. So before we even know what's happened, we have different offices that are ready to support students and give them a space to talk and debrief. The political science department traditionally has always hosted a panel just after the election, and we have that scheduled. We've also, I know groups like Campus Rec are planning to have sort of politics-free spaces so that if you want to get away from it, that is available as well. So we've planned a wide variety of events, and they're all up there on the ELN Votes website. So I would encourage students to check those out and find what feels like the right thing for them in the days after the election.
And when we come back, we'll fill you in on precinct locations and road closures to be aware of tomorrow.
And be mindful tomorrow night as you're awaiting election results. Haggard Avenue will be closed from 9 p.m. Wednesday to 7 a.m. Thursday. According to Vice President of Student Life John Dooley, it's closed for a public art project sponsored by the Division of Student Life. And Phoenix Drive, the road behind Global Neighborhood, will be closed tomorrow and Wednesday evening from 6 p.m. until midnight.
If you're registered to vote in North Carolina and plan on voting in person tomorrow, there's a few details you need to know before you go. The polls will open for Election Day tomorrow here in North Carolina beginning at 6:30 a.m. and close at 7:30 p.m. There are 38 polling locations in Alamance County, but 7 were replaced with larger temporary locations this year to meet physical distancing requirements. One of the 7 locations is Elon Elementary School, which is one of 2 precincts Elon's campus is divided into. This location was formerly listed as Antioch Community Church. It's located at 720 Walker Road. The other location is First Baptist Church of Elon, which has not changed locations. It's located at 621 East Haggard Avenue. If students are unable to get to the polls tomorrow, the university is providing a shuttle that leaves from the Center of the Arts and runs in a loop from campus to both polling locations from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Voters will not be required to show photo ID tomorrow unless their original registration application was not confirmed. If that's the case, students who live on campus should bring a valid student photo ID card. Students who live off campus should bring a valid student photo ID card and a copy of a bill, check, or other government document showing their name and address in Alamance County. For more information on which polling location to visit and day of details, visit our 2020 voter guide on our website, elonnewsnetwork.com.
Our Brian Ray, who will be anchoring our special election coverage tomorrow night, joins us now to tell us to tune in. Tell us why to tune in. Brian?
Thanks, Maeve and Margaret. After nearly 2 years of campaigning and debating, it all comes down to tomorrow night. Be sure to join me along with Maeve and Baylor Rodman for ELN's special coverage of Election Night 2020. We'll bring you the latest updates, projections, and analysis on the races here in Alamance County, throughout North Carolina, and across the country. We'll break down the local races and discuss how they affect the balance of power nationally. You'll also hear from political experts and campus voices throughout the night. Our team will be on the
Elon University is reporting 8 new coronavirus cases today, with 620 students in quarantine. Chair of the Ready and Resilient Committee, Jeff Stein, says the social hiatus measures will remain in place, and the focus of our entire community should be on wearing masks, limiting social contacts, and keeping each other healthy before Thanksgiving. And just into our newsroom, tomorrow's protest will be rescheduled to 3 p.m. due to cold temperatures in the morning. And that's all the news we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Be sure to join us right here tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern for our special Election Night 2020 coverage. We'll see you then.